So we're going to recap what we did a few classes back, and then we're also going to add. We're going to add some new concepts of Kabbalah into our repertoire so we can start building some terminology so we can feel like we speak the language. So one quick second. So in the last class, we saw that there was something that was infinite, that there is left behind an infinite substance that we refer to as light. And like the instructors were saying, this light reduces itself through a series of worlds. And worlds come from the word olam, which comes from the root word alam, which means hiddenness or to conceal. So there's something within each of these worlds that's concealed from us. And when we get to the bottom, we reach what we call a maxim, or it can be referred to as a barrier. And that brings us to this dark reality that has no clue, no idea, no sense of what's above. It only feels within its program, within how it was designed, within the force of the law. And this we refer to as our world. And if we were to look at this world and see how it's organized, we would find that it breaks down, like we described previously, into these 5 worlds, referred to as Adam Kadmon, Absolute, Bariya, Yetzirah, and the bottom world, the world of Asiya. And these are all spiritual realities. There are developmental forces within each of these worlds that take us from below, that take us from the sense of needing self-fulfillment, self-gratification, and it puts us in touch with the rest of reality. So what are we and how are we currently designed? Why are we unable to feel this upper reality? A person, or what we read in the text, man, M uppercase M uppercase A uppercase N, stands for Mayan Hanukva, or Nukve. It means the prayer of deficiency. So for something to be a created being, it has to understand how it's organized. And currently, we are as if a box. And our box is made up of openings that we call senses, our corporeal senses. And this box is organized on a program. We can call it our 5 senses, and that's what it is at the moment, but it also can be looked at as, let's just call it biological intelligence. And you find that there's another intelligence. And this, well, you can't see it that well. This biological intelligence operates on the program of me, corporeality, egoism. What am I going to get out of this? What's in it for me? And this idea of me can be broken down into 2 sections. And we'll look at that in a quick second. The reason that it needs to be broken down is that this box, this thing that senses objects and reality, is operating on a program. So if something was from the greater reality to approach this box, this corporeally sensing entity, the object would come into contact, but it wouldn't enter. Instead, there would be a barrier on the inside that would allow nothing inside. You guys mute yourselves? There'd be nothing inside this reality. So what we have to do is we have to take the me and understand that me is basically egoism. And to get out of our egoism, we have to do what the text told us. We have to raise this concept called man. And this raising of man takes this program that's operating and it adds an additional quality to it, which takes the 5 senses out of themselves and allows them to negate their program and begin to add in an additional prong. And if we do that, we can go from egoism to altruism. And this is the goal of Kabbalah, to go from self-benefit to altruism. But it's not as easy as thinking positively about other people. There are qualities that need to be discerned. So when this object hits this box, and this can be any situation we've ever had, any occurrence, the program inside, the social amalgamation of all of our experiences, determined off of what's in it for me, takes this experience and it builds it into our reality. Now, this reality is a subjective reality. It's a subjective reality that only understands based on the program's experience. So like the instructor said, we have to add something to our experience. We have to add in a method. And this is what Kabbalah does. Kabbalah lets us understand that this complete reality that exists, whether or not we understand it, which unfolds through a series, is nothing more than the force of above and below coming into contact. And this force of above and below is, hopefully red's more visible, is nothing more than the creator and opposite the creator is the created being. And the created being is created off of egoism in order to raise man so that it can somehow develop within itself the quality of above, the quality of altruism. And we call this altruism bestowal. And bestowal works on what's called a will. So you have a will to bestow that's foreign to how we think currently. And what we have is reception. Currently, we operate on the will to receive. And this will, this desire, this need is completely opposite from how the force of above constructs itself. And our need is to look at the system, this complete perfect system that is operating regardless of whether we know it or not, and start to build it within ourselves. We have to, if we want to go from no sensation of the upper force to a complete understanding and feeling and sense of what eternity is, we're going to have to slowly build within us a sense of the true reality, which is what Kabbalah will help us to do. But to do that, we have to understand how we develop. We have to look at our makeup, and we have to see what brings us from where we currently are to where we want to go. And we need to understand that we're designed along a series of needs, which we call lacks or wants, and the filling, the pleasure, the joy, the bestowal that comes from it. And we've seen it as, we've seen it before, and we've been sensing it our whole lives. And the senses that we've gone through look like this. At first, the instructors just want to mute yourselves, please. So the first sense that we have, is just a very small need. So if we look at ourselves as a vessel, we are a vessel with minimal needs, with not a lot of requirements. Our program, the operating system that we operate under, hasn't fully developed. And at first, like Maslow, we need survival mechanisms. We need food, sex, and homes. That's all we require. It's our primal type needs. And if we fill them, then we can move on to something greater. So at first we find survival. And after survival, once that need's been fed and it's come to the point where it's no longer requiring to be filled, we can move on to something else. And when we move on, we find that the next place, the next vessel that we need to fill with pleasure from above is wealth. And wealth is the accumulation of the previous desires. So it's nothing more than having food storage rather than hunting and gathering, having a spouse or a way to have your sexual needs met. And instead of being nomadic, we would have a home. We would go from a teepee to a palace and everything in between. And the accumulation of goods or the accumulation of desires that sets us apart from animals, and at first we see our fellow man as animals, or at least competing with them like animals, brings us to wealth. And wealth is great, but as soon as wealth has been met and the need has been fulfilled, we need something more, and our vessel increases. And it increases by adding the two previous desires to it and filling it with power. Power is the idea of fortune. It's accumulation of goods in a way that allows me to control the people around me. It's not just having stuff, but it's having stuff that other people desire. It's setting me apart from them in a way that I'll be seen as better, or that they'll have to come to me for things, or I'll be able to hold influence over them. It's conquest, it's political, it's many different things. It's our economic system, it's our health system, so that some are sick and some are healthy. And it's all these things where we can look at each other and size one another up. Power is great, but it doesn't last that long. And when we move on from it and need something greater, we find that we need something more, something that's going to give us not just the thrive and the thrill that we need, but a way to become something, almost a personality. We look at knowledge and need intellect. We need a way to become a personality outside of ourselves. We need a way to not just dominate the situation that we had, the powerful need to dominate others, but we want them to respect us. We want them to give us things that will feed not so much what we see as the physical world, but what we see as systematically controlling the physical world. So when we get to intellect or knowledge, we will look at systems of beauty and we want to be artists, and we will look at knowledge where we want to be professors, or we want to do great things for the world so that we can get a Nobel Prize. But every pursuit that we go down, every road that we follow within this desire is only going to be to exploit others and be seen as superior. And this is what each level has done for us. And when we get to this fourth phase, and there are 4 phases of what we call corporeality. It's not too visible, but our corporeality comes to the barrier. And after this, when we reach the sense of nothingness, when we feel empty after all of this pursuit and conquest, we need a new reality. And we start to ask questions. And we start to look for a spiritual reality. And this is what brings us to the wisdom of Kabbalah. And the spiritual reality, it starts within our heart. And we've all heard of our heart and we think that it's a happy place, but it's the culmination of all of our desires. It's everything that we've ever wanted. It's all of our experiences that we'd like to continue on. It is the climax of what keeps us pulsating here in this world. And at first, it's filled with things that are empty. This is why we kept moving from one desire to the next. And at some point, this force of infinity, the force of above, places within us a desire from a level above this world. And if this desire can be met, if it can be filled, it can start to fill all the other empty desires within our heart. And when this begins to happen, this, what we call a point in the heart, it begins to expand. And as it begins to expand, it starts to fill all of our previous desires, all of our primal desires, all of our uncorrected sensations for exploitation, and it begins to add within them this quality of above, this bestowal. And if we can continue to work the method, and if we can find a proper environment and build the force of above, the system that operates us within, then this point has a chance. And with that, we have a chance of going from this cold, cruel world to infinity. But there's more to it. This system that we developed through has left within it a series of rungs, steps along the ladder. And with each one of these steps, we will intensify this point in the heart, and we'll begin to climb this ladder. And the way that we climb this ladder is by remembering that we have these points, these spiritual remembrances. And within each step of the ladder, we will awaken these remembrances. And what they'll start to do is they'll have us climb from world to world, and we'll begin to bridge these gaps within each world. And as we do, we'll eventually bridge the entire gap and climb the entire ladder from our world to the infinite reality where everything is pure and whole and where there's no sensation other than loving kindness. Also, what happens within these worlds is we find that they are ratios, and each world is a ratio of reception and bestowal. And what we need to do is we need to start incorporating and increasing the quality of the soul within us, so that at first we feel our reception and we start to use it in a way that we've never sensed before. Later on, as we begin to climb, we see that we've incorporated more and more and more of the force of above, until we can get to the point where the only thing that's sensed within us is these additional gains of the force of above, until this is all that's left. This is how we'll eventually climb from below to above. Are there any questions?